Hello, everybody. It's now 11:01, so let's get started. Welcome, first of all, to the Smarter Data, Better Outcomes webinar. And we're excited to go through today's session with you. While we still have everyone coming in as the webinar starts, we're just going to go through some house rules and some admin. So any questions throughout today's webinar, we do have the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So please feel free to do any questions there. And we'll be monitoring that throughout today's webinar, so they'll be answered in live time. We always get this question. Slides will be available for download. There is a QR code at the end of the deck from today. So yeah, please follow that QR code for instructions and you will receive those slides. We will also be recording today's session, which reminds me, I'll press the record button. It's already going. Perfect. And definitely today, get involved, please. We do have some polls early on, so we're keen to hear how everyone's reporting their own organisation, just so you can get the most out of it. So get involved when it comes to the poll time. So in terms of today's session overview, we'll start by going through the data challenge with Ryan. We'll talk about the state of play when it comes to reporting in many organisations and the opportunities based on that moving forward. We'll then hand over to Nora, who will go through what Supermetrics is. She'll describe it in very easy to understand plain terms, how you can use it, and the benefits of Supermetrics. We'll then walk through around 4 live dashboards just so you can see Supermetrics in action, what sort of insights you can gain from those reports, and how that can really inform your marketing strategy. And then we'll end looking ahead at some data warehousing with Ryan there. So before we get right into it, I want to start with an acknowledgement. So in Australia, Digital Ninjas and Supermetrics acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, for they hold the memories, the tradition, and the culture of all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. In terms of who we are, so I'm Adam Brady. I'm a digital strategist team lead here at Digital Ninjas. I'm joined by Ryan Jones, a digital strategist, also from Digital Ninjas, and Nora Hungersheffer from Supermetrics, who's a senior customer success manager, ANZ. So as I mentioned, keen for all of you to get involved. We do have a poll to really set the scene for today's webinar. So I'm just going to pop up a question for you. Please answer on your screen as they come up. So the first question for today, how many different places does your team pull data from to build a single report? And when I'm talking about places, I'm talking about Meta, Google Ads, Campaign Monitor, Mailchimp, your CRM, or Google Analytics. So just answer on your screen there. Okay, perfect. I can see some answers coming through. Got lots of more than 5s, 4, 3, 2 here as well. Okay, I'll give you another 5 seconds or so. Okay, you should now be able to see the results on your screen. As you can see, overwhelmingly, people here are pulling from multiple sources. We've got 13 users doing more than 5, 13 with 4, and then 9 with 3. So it seems like all of you are pulling from numerous data sources just to get that reporting together. Okay. Then we'll go on to the second question. So if I asked 3 different people in your organization for last month's marketing performance, would I get 3 different numbers? Yes, no, or I don't know. Okay, some good answers coming through. Okay, I'll give you 5 more seconds. Okay. Cool, you can all see the results now. So it looks overwhelmingly, you will get different results depending on organization. So that's why this webinar is really, really important. You want to make sure all your team's on the same page, just so you're getting accurate numbers there. Okay, question 3. So when it comes to your organization, does your reporting process involve someone manually exporting a CSV file and pasting it into a spreadsheet or deck? Okay, perfect. Just 5 more seconds. Okay, some pretty interesting results here. As you can see, overwhelmingly, most people have a manual reporting process. As you can imagine, that's not only time consuming, but it can also lead to lots of errors. So we're definitely keen to dig into that a little bit more today. Let's go into question 4. Okay, how much time per month does someone in your organization spend gathering and formatting data before any actual analysis happens? Okay, just the final few ones that's coming through. Okay, it looks like we have a fairly large consensus here. We can see the bulk of people spending more than an hour manually pulling and formatting data. I don't know about you, but I'm sure you can be spending that time elsewhere on something a little bit more useful. So yeah, hopefully you'll get quite a bit out of today's session. Okay, we'll move on to the second last question of our poll. Are naming conventions and metric definitions consistent across your team? So when I'm talking around metric definitions, does everyone classify a conversion or a click as the same thing? Or does everyone define them slightly differently depending on who you ask and what team they're in? Yeah, I'll just give you 5 more seconds. Okay, perfect. Well, not so perfect. It looks like there is a bit of inconsistency across some teams. The bulk of people here are finding that there's no consistency across their organization, which, as you can imagine, if different people are looking at the same dashboard, a whole lot of errors and issues can arise from that. So we're definitely keen to get on the same page around consistency today. And now my final question in the poll. So if you needed a custom set of data within your organization, how long would it take to typically turn around? Okay, just 5 more seconds. Okay. Surprisingly, only 8 of you said too long, but I argue if you're getting it within the week, that's probably too long as well. So yeah, we're definitely keen to show you today how you can get that insights and that data more instantly. Okay. And now I'm going to hand over to you, Ryan, to get started with today's session.
Great, thank you. Yeah, some really interesting results there, and I think this leads in quite well to what we're going to start off with, which is the current state of play, the data challenge that we see today. So we saw obviously some good results coming through there, but this one is one that definitely backs that up, which is that we see just 36% of marketers say that they can accurately measure return on investment. So this is marketers as a whole, like industry-wide, and then within that, 47% say they struggle to measure ROI across multiple channels. And that's definitely what we saw in the poll results. And with ROI being that big pressure that we see on marketers, like from everyone above us that we're reporting to, this is where we want the priority, but that's where we're not really being able to deliver, I guess. It's under delivering where we don't understand the data and we can't really deliver that accurate ROI. And the main reason for that being the data that we use. So it's both good and both bad that data is everywhere. So there's so many different touch points from all these different channels. And with all of these, there's the opportunity to add different insight and be able to attribute results to all of these different touch points. And this is what helps us inform decisions. So any conversion that comes through, any click, we want to attribute those to a different touch point, a different channel, a campaign within that channel. And then that helps us see where we want to put investment or pull campaigns, anything like that. But to start with, we need accurate data. So building out a solid ROI system, and with this, it is just going into data-driven marketing. So I've got an interesting point down here, which is that data-driven marketing results in a 5 to 8% higher return on investment, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when we're talking about revenue, which might be 7 or 8 figures, then it all adds up, like it's quite a bit. And where that positive return on investment comes from is that we're not putting budget or spend into campaigns that aren't performing well. And using your data and accurately reporting on it, this is where we can really see where that wasted spend is coming from. So now going more into the realities of it. So like I highlighted, there just really isn't that solid system for return on investment measurement across most organizations. So 73% of marketers say they don't really have a solid system to measure ROI. And a lot of this, I think, comes from that multi-channel approach, where as soon as you've got data coming from, say, Meta and Reddit and Google, all of these are processing the data themselves, you're exporting it, and it's just being processed individually rather than with the same set of rules. So then when it comes to attributing any results, this can be misaligned. So you don't really have the solid facts because everything is based on a different attribution model. So Meta will measure separately to Reddit, Reddit will measure separately to Google. And it just means you could then be putting funding into something that says it's working well, but when you have that single source of truth, it then highlights that these campaigns have been over-attributed to themselves, because that's what you tend to find within these different platforms. And then this is sort of the 5 points that we pull out for reporting. So this is how we approach like every dashboard that we put together. And it's probably a good starting point in building out your own. So the first one is prioritizing that channel mix. So like I said, every different channel has its own database, and pulling everything separately from there can be a bit confusing. But what good reporting does is help you analyze that channel mix all in one place, all together. You can accurately report on it and then really prioritize which channels you use, because you've got then reliable results. And then this is one which is quite an easy one, quite a nice one, but building your dashboard so it's an appealing design. So it's very simple to just brand up your dashboard, have the branding colors, things like that, and then you've got a very basic template for your reporting. So this means whenever someone else is creating a new report, they've got a template to base this off of. And with your dashboard, so often I'd say we have maybe 10 stakeholders that want to look at an individual dashboard, and not all of it is going to be relevant to each person. They're going to want to go into it and just look at the campaigns relevant to them, so they can use the search functionality for that, or you can just filter out ones that might not be relevant, and then they can immediately just see exactly what they need in order to help with decision making. And then this next point, strength in numbers, sort of ties in with like that template, that branded up template of a dashboard, where if you've built out a dashboard which has tables in it, you've set which metrics are in those tables. So every time someone recreates a dashboard through that template, they're using that same table. And all you have to do is change the data source then, so that every bit of data that flows into that table is processed the same. So this means that you know that the data that you're working with is always going to be formatted universally between anyone within the department or across departments. And then that means that decision making is just that bit more accurate. So you don't have people pull in different click metrics or different CTR metrics, like click-through rate metrics. that might make their campaign look a little bit better, but it's ignoring that one that shows that the campaign's underperforming. But then if it looks better than one that is actually converting, that's where the investment's going to go, and you'll probably see performance dip in the next month or two. And then this last point is insightful analysis, so built into a dashboard. And we currently do this across a few dashboards using AI. I know when we talk about AI with reporting, you can imagine it's just exporting the dashboard, putting it into ChatGPT and asking it to analyze it. And that's not what we're talking about here. So this is that repetitive analysis that you can build into a dashboard by adding an AI prompt, say, as a metric or a dimension. And then it just speeds up that repetitive analysis that you might do every week. So it can be things like doing an image analysis, and you'd set a prompt to see which images are text heavy, people heavy, they might be grayscale, or what's the most prominent color within that. And then you can easily filter out to see what's common with each campaign and which ad that's performing well. There's something that we'll go into a bit more later, but just touching on it here as a good starting point for building out a dashboard. And then, like I said, that's the 5 main points for how we focus on building a dashboard. But then this is what really all this ties in together to build. So where you've got your main reporting dashboard, you're pulling in from social media channels, Google, website. So you've got Meta, LinkedIn, Reddit, TikTok. Within Google, you've got your Google paid account, maybe a Google Grant account, and even Search Console if you want to see some SEO performance. And then website, you've got your own website. And then if you're using Workday or any sort of donation platform. And the benefit of having all of this in one reporting dashboard is that you can really compare things across all of these different channels. So you might have a creative that you're using in a TikTok campaign, and you're using the same one then in a Google paid campaign, and it's also on your donation platform. And having all this in the same dashboard means that you can see the performance of that creative on TikTok in that Google paid campaign and the interaction rate with it on the donation platform. So it might be performing very well on TikTok, but the Google paid campaign performance is lagging slightly. So what you can do then is quite easily see what audience are interacting with it on TikTok. This might be 18 to 25, and then your Google paid campaign is just set to target 65 plus. So what you can easily see from this is that you either want to change that Google campaign to target the younger audience, or if that's not fitting with your strategy, you can just turn off that campaign and put more investment into the TikTok campaign. And then by analyzing this with how it's interacted with on the donation platform, you can then see if it's the universal image that people are interacting with, or if it is the audience. So they might scroll through the donation platform and just really interact with a video on there or make a donation. And you can attribute this all back then to that campaign, to that image, and that can help you build out any sorts of future campaigns and assets that you'll use within them. So with all of this, we've been using like Supermetrics as a data tool to help us pull in all of these different channels and create that analysis. And now it's probably quite helpful for me to hand over to Nora to discuss a bit more of what Supermetrics is.
Yes, and let me share my screen. I hope you can all see my screen. So I thought I tell you a little bit about Supermetrics, how it works, what it does. And with that, also kind of give you a bit of an insight or a look under the hood to see how the engine works. And also kind of give a bit of an introduction about technology and what is possible, especially when we're all talking about AI, LLMs, how that can play into it as well. So maybe to kick us off, I thought I kind of just go or more echo or reiterate what we've spoken about and what you guys really confirmed earlier as well about the huge amount of data that is out there. So as mentioned, and Ryan also said before, is kind of there are so many different data sources out there at the moment, and the data volume really increases year on year. So we, for example, just on our platform recording data coming through, but also in general, really see that if we look at for example, back in 2020, back to what kind of data we have access to today, it's like you can see easily an increase of like over 230%. It's crazy the amount of data. But that also means there are a lot of different data platforms out there. Like, for example, kind of you can see up to just 15,000 more plus data tools out there which collect the data, which kind of have their own language they speak, and different data points pulling through. So putting together that chaos, pulling that together really is the key function of Supermetrics and what it was designed to do. And that is really the foundation and really the engine behind what the lovely or great digital ninja teams do with their work and the reporting they do. So it really kind of pulls it all together, puts it in one place, so you have one truth, one source of truth where the data sits and what you can work with. It's really the foundation everything is built on. And I thought I kind of give you a little bit of a sneak peek what that looks like, what this engine really does and how it works. So if we're looking at this slide and going kind of from left to right, I start off with the data sources. As I mentioned, you all, even in the poll mentioned, you use and pull data from several different data sources. So minimum 4, 5, and even more. These all can be connected to Supermetrics. So you really pull them all into one platform. That's really the idea. And the idea is really to get everything in everything you need. So meaning from your paid media to your organic to CRM data, or even if you have custom data you need to pull in, that is all possible with that platform. Then once it comes into the Supermetric platform, you're able to work with it. What that means is you can kind of manage it, and the system does automatically look at all the connectors you pull in, the data sources, and it actually speaks their language. So it understands and identifies the data points, it aligns them, so you really can look through and get a holistic view of different data points and data sources you connect. It allows you to apply custom fields if you have specific identifiers, for example, you need, and it really gives you the chance of governance and a shared context to really align everything. And the key point really is so that everyone who looks at the data looks at the same thing. It looks at clean, reliable numbers to build upon. And that is really key when you're trying to get an understanding of, for example, your spend, if you want to understand what is going on in your media performance with your spending, if you need to align ROI. So that's the kind of idea behind it. And then we're coming to the next step, which is pushing it into a destination. And that is also where it kind of gets interesting. So kind of what the Ryan, for example, mentioned. So kind of this is the area where you, for example, when it comes to visualization, you can build reporting. So you can push all the data and the aligned and clean data into, let's say, a Looker Studio or now a Data Studio report, into a Google Sheet, into any choice where you would like to visualize your data. The system, our platform also allows you to push it, for example, into a data warehouse. If you need kind of to add a little bit more historical data, if you kind of really want to get a wide view of previous performance, historical data, and up-to-date kind of current data. We also have an aspect of build on, which is kind of like more where our API and MCP comes in. It's kind of where team can build their own products and workflows on top of their data. And last but not least, I also added here an AI chat destination. So we're all living in a world where AI kind of really comes into our everyday life and into our work. And we've really built our platform as well in a way where this is kind of easily integrated, where it allows you to, for example, connect with AI and use that to really optimize your workflows and really use it to your advantage. But the key thing about Supermetrics is to build a foundation and a solid foundation. And because in order for you to get reliable data, to get consistent data, you need the foundation to be right. And that's really what Supermetrics is here for. And with that said, you can really am able to, looking at our use cases, really to pull in this data into reporting, to build analysis, and that really gives you insights to optimize your entire workflow, to optimize really your spend, to measure, make really kind of your spend measurable, kind of we were talking about ROI before, and that allows you to not really spend time and connecting to millions of different data sources, pulling them in manually, try to align the data, but it actually frees you up to have reporting that really allows you to sit down and spend your time where it means or where you need to. And that means kind of to strategize, build strategies, and really kind of push your organization forward. And I thought I'd tip a little bit further into also the AI aspect in it, because it is something that is kind of key. We can, that kind of governs our day-to-day life. And just to kind of give you a bit of an introduction, how fundamental really robust baseline like Supermetrics is. Because looking at AI, there are a lot of options out there what you can do. But the key about this is, oh, let me see if I can change slides. Here we go. It's about the foundation needs to be right. Because only if you put the right information in, you will get good information out. And looking at the way Supermetrics is set up, it's kind of its own governed ecosystem. So it really connects an LLM or any AI tool you might have only to the accurate and correct data. And it really is, using AI can be a powerful tool if it is used correctly and it has access and set up correctly. So what we've seen, for example, is with LLMs, they can be amazing for really ad hoc, in the moment, for example, feedback. They're amazing for that as well. Really kind of by using, for example, AI chats, you can connect them to your data, ask them questions, and kind of get very quick feedback. It allows you to quickly even have a quick visualization for the question you've been asking. And also, it really gives you the potential to even kind of challenge questions, kind of ask a little bit what is next. Also, with the digital ninja team, use it to kind of also help. And it kind of also outlines maybe blind spots you have. So, kind of if I have a campaign, what should I maybe be thinking about? And when the LLMs are connected to really the right foundation and really have access to the correct data, meaning your live data, the outcome can be really profound and really impressive and can support you with quick and accurate information in speed time. But as mentioned, kind of like just to kind of round the section up, is Supermetrics is really the backbone and providing the Digital Ninja team with the right data foundation, and also you guys kind of with a ground to build up on. That is reliable, it automizes, and really provides you one single source of truth where you kind of have reliable data, robust data. You can then pull into the destination of your choice to build reports and really give you the insights you need to move your organization, your marketing spend forward. And with that said, I might just hand back over to Adam to take us through the next. Let me see if I can change. Oh.
Thank you, Nora. Yeah, so that's all great information, but now we're going to go through into the visualization of that data for you. I'm just going to share in some live dashboards so you can see Supermetrics at work. Perfect. So at the moment, we're looking at one of the reports, which is a cross-channel budget reallocation. And as we saw in the poll, a lot of you are running campaigns on multiple different channels. And what we imagine a challenge is getting all of that data into one location. Here you can see a visualization using Data Studio, or what Google called Studio about a month ago. They've changed the name about 12 times. But we can see all of the data from these various channels at a single glance. We can see impressions, clicks, conversions, return on ad spend, and then spend combined from your various marketing channels. In this specific example, we're pulling from TikTok, Facebook, and Google Ads. All of this information is really good to have at a glance. We can then see trending spend by date, historical return on ad spend over time, and then historical CPA over time as well, all broken down by channel. For me, however, I find this bottom of the report the key elements to look at. As you can see, we've got a breakdown of how Google Ads is trending in terms of spend and return on ad spend. We can then see the exact same figures across Facebook ads and then TikTok ads. And having all of this data is great, but what's really important is that we're actually interrogating the data. As you can see here, the return on ad spend on Google is the highest at 5.2, compared to TikTok ads, which has 4.5, and then Facebook ads with 4.4. That said, in this fictitious example, I should say, they're not spending 3.39 million in a month, but as you can see, the level of spend on Google ads is lower compared to the other channels. So if you're running these campaigns and looking at these various figures all collectively, you might see that there's an initial opportunity to invest more in Google based on the results here. Obviously, it's very important to look at the different channels and where they sit in terms of the marketing funnel. As we know, Google ads is definitely more bottom of funnel, especially with search campaigns, compared to Facebook ads and TikTok ads, which might be more middle of the funnel. Pulling down here a little bit further as well, we can see Supermetrics allows you to combine all of your campaigns into one singular table, regardless of which data source they're from. Often we have clients who have a specific Google ad campaign table, a specific Facebook ads campaign table, and a specific TikTok ads campaign table. But here we can see everything collectively in one view, which is really, really great for that really quick analysis. With Supermetrics and with Looker, we can also filter based on these column names. So let's say, for example, I want to see which of my campaigns across all of my channels are driving the most conversions. I can simply click on the conversion column and it will filter like so. As you can see, the top campaign in terms of conversions is from TikTok ads. Then I might want to ask which campaign is driving the strongest return on ad spend. Again, I can just simply click on that ROAS column and it will filter accordingly. As you can see, it's a YouTube Google ads campaign. Okay, I'm just going to jump into another really, really cool report. And this one is around audience segmentation. So with many of the organizations we work with, you have various audience personas or mosaics that you run across all of your activity. And quite often it's difficult to pinpoint which specific audiences are working well. You might find something's working well on one channel, but not on another. And using Supermetrics, we combine this all into one view. In this specific example, we can see this one organization has 4 different audiences, global citizens being one, environmentalists being another, socially conscious users being another, and then finally philanthropists. And we can see they're running activity on Google ads, Facebook ads, and Snapchat ads. At an overarching level, it's really great to see that we can dig into CPA. As you can see, environmentalist has the second highest CPA, so it's the second lowest performing, but it's actually where most of the spend is going within this one organization. So having this data available at a glance can really inform where we shift that budget. As Ryan touched on a little bit earlier, we can also use filters on Looker, so multiple teams can look at the same data. At a top level, we might be looking at pausing global citizens, for example, based on that CPA. However, as we look at a regional basis, I'm just going to change to the US now, for example, we can see the data is actually entirely different. Global citizens has the lowest CPA and the most spend. So having that filtering capability makes it really easy for different teams to use all of that data to inform how they drive their strategy. Okay, the next one I'm going to touch on is around creative fatigue. So many of the organizations we work with often ask, how frequently should I be updating my creatives? And unfortunately, there's no one size fits all. It definitely varies depending on the organization, your level of investment, and the audience sizes you're actually working towards. So unfortunately, we can't give you one answer there. That said, though, using Supermetrics, we can keep track of 3 key metrics, which helps identify when fatigue is in play. The key metrics to look at are cost per click, click-through rate, and then also cost per action. And as you can see, we've got a bit of a case of fatigue here. Cost per click's increased over time, click-through rate has declined over time, and CPA has also increased as well. Very similar to that audience segmentation dashboard we just walked through though, it's important not to make decisions on overarching data. And that's where filtering again really comes into play. Here we've got 4 different creatives which we're running with this fictitious organization. I can then click on each individual creative to see how that specific creative is performing over time. So as I click on the first one, when it loads, we'll see cost per click is actually fairly stable. Click-through rate, as it loads as well, it'll be fairly stable. I've practiced ahead, so don't worry. And cost per action is fairly stable too. So with all of that in mind, it seems to be that this creative isn't worth needing a refresh at this point in time. The second one, which I'm going to touch on, you can see a very similar trend. Cost per click, click-through rate, cost per action, again, fairly stable. So we don't need to overhaul all of the creatives within this given campaign. But as we go into the third creative, we can definitely see a trend as it loads. Cost per click has steadily increased. Click-through rate has had a significant decrease, especially since around the 21st year. And then cost per action has definitely grown over time as well. That said, it's important to look at the context of all the creatives in the market. As you can see, it's actually the best performing from CPA in the last 7 days, and also the best performing in the CPA in the last 30 days. So with all of this information in mind, there's definitely not a point in pausing this one creative, given it's your best performer, but rather you could introduce a new introduction of the same creative, whether it's a small tweak to the actual image, or whether it's a modification to the actual accompanying ad copy. So there's quite a bit of flexibility there. And then the final report I'm going to talk about is the AI image analysis. So as Ryan mentioned, there are some AI tools within Supermetrics which can really help with your analysis. With many organizations we work with, you're running multiple campaigns across multiple channels. Within those campaigns, you have multiple different ad sets or ad groups. And within each ad set or ad group, you have multiple creatives. So the sheer volume of creatives you're working with makes it really difficult to identify what is and what isn't working. So with the AI image tool within Supermetrics, you can apply labels to identify common themes within the creatives across your account. This could be things like whether your images include people or don't, or very simple things like the actual tone of the image. Is it quite light or dark? When it comes to an organizational standpoint, if you're an animal welfare organization, it might be, are they cuddly animals or are they more ferocious animals like lions? If you're a medical research charity, do the images contain researchers or patients? Using all of that information in mind, you can then break down performance here. You can see in this example, we're looking at whether there's images present, whether there's people present in the images, how that impacts click-through rate and conversions. Obviously, it's important to look at other metrics like spend, cost per conversion, and conversion rate, just to have the full picture. Even with Supermetrics, you can break it down with multiple AI image analysis labels at once. So whether there's people present in the images and whether the actual image is quite dark or quite light. And this can really inform your creative approach moving forward to determine which images you should create more of and which you should create less of. Okay, and now I'm going to hand over to Ryan to go through data warehousing.
Thank you, Adam. And yeah, we've now got a QR code for downloading today's slides, which you can download now and then see if you can get to the end of the slideshow before I do. It's the last section to go through. Yeah, we've covered a lot of data, obviously, but discussing all these different channels. And as we saw in the poll, a lot of you are using multiple channels, sometimes 5+. So I find this next section quite more interesting now, because I didn't really expect so many different channels. But yeah, when we talk about data warehousing, I think it's often quite scary for a marketing department or even any organization, because there's not much understanding of what it is, what it does, and what the actual benefit is. So to break it down and go through it quite simply, I've compared it to a database. So a database is where you'll be getting your current data from, which will be Meta, Google, Reddit, TikTok. They all have their own database. So they store just that singular source of data and any of the mutually related data to that. So within Meta, it will just be the Meta ad data and any click-through data from there, and any conversions, it's using that Meta attribution model. The same that Reddit will do that, and the same that Google will do that. And with these databases, I'm sure you can see when you do your analysis, they have quite small storage capacity, often 12 to 18 months for a lot of data. Simple data, you can see a bit more historically, but still you don't have that in-depth data, so you can do like trend analysis. And the reason for that is that it's quite high storage cost, because obviously there's thousands, millions of organizations on Meta all asking them to store their data. But with data warehousing, so obviously then you take control of your data, you own it, so that makes it a lot cheaper and you can store it for as long as you want. And with that, you can store as many data sources as you want. So you can pull in this data from Google, from Meta, from Reddit, TikTok, your website, everything. And you set up a rule to process it, and then it goes into your data warehouse and is stored there the same every time it does that pull, essentially. So it can be hourly, every few hours, every day, however often you want to set it, where every time it'll pull that data from each database, process it the same way, and it means you've got reliability that your clicks are always going to be stored the same, your click-through rate will always be accurate, and any attribution that you've set to it, those conversions will be accurate. And this means that you can pull data across all these different channels, but also for cross-department. So working within not-for-profits, often marketing and fundraising teams will be separate. They won't often interact with each other, and then it can be quite difficult to see any outside interaction that can have an influence on your campaigns. But with having this cross-departmental data available within a data warehouse, you can see this kind of stuff then. So you might want to see why there's been an uplift in donations, and it could be that marketing have run a campaign that's really hit home with people and they want to donate off the back of that, even though it's maybe a lead generation campaign. And then also with storing your own data, you can keep it for as long as you want. I'd say you wouldn't really need it more than 10 years, but having that availability to see historic trends is helpful for campaign planning. Because if you're looking back 12 months and you can see, well, let's use the World Cup, Football World Cup this year as an example. Next year, when you look back as a sporting organization, you'll obviously see a big spike in sales around June and July. And you might think, okay, this year it's going to be the same. Let's plan a lot more budget for them, but it doesn't really hit the mark. Whereas if you were storing your data for 10 years, you'd see every 4 years you get that spike, and you're not going to see that every year. And that can translate quite well into every organization as well, where you'll just have this outside interaction that every now and again will have an influence on how people interact with your organization, but it might not be the same every year. So being able to historically see that analysis can just help with budget planning, and then going back to return on investment, you can really plan to see a positive return on investment through that time, rather than over-investing because it happened last year but didn't happen the 2 or 3 years before that. And then because you're storing this data in-house, depending on how long you want to store it and how many channels you have, this really depends on the storage cost. But it can often just be low to medium, because this tends to be cloud storage. So you don't need a huge database. You don't need to have your own system set up. It's just in the cloud, wherever it is somewhere up there. And then this leads into the benefits of it. So I know I've sort of gone through that and explaining what a data warehouse is, but really just to highlight those key points where data warehousing becomes that single source of truth. So you've got all of your channels going to one location, and it's processed the same. You know that every time someone pulls a report using data from your data warehouse, that it's going to be, well, it can be accurate, but it's also going to be the same across every report. And then also there's the speed of reporting. So not to pick on Adam here, but in refreshing that campaign, you could see that it was buffering slightly because it's pulling data from different databases rather than a data warehouse. And we'll find that quite often, where if you're sending a request for data to Meta whilst also sending one to Google and TikTok, these can take different times to load, but then also it's doing this at the same time, it's overloaded. But with a data warehouse, where the data's just sat there, it's then going through a single pathway to your dashboard and can update a lot quicker. And when we talk about speed, it's often a few seconds, but then it's also that having that single source of data means your dashboard's less likely to crash and break. And if it does, there's only one place to go to fix it. So it makes it a lot more reliable. And then there's the ownership of the data. So like I said, the historical data, you can see the last 10 years and really build up an idea of what trends are going to be coming for the next 10 years, because you have all of that data to look back on. And yeah, we've come to the end of the presentation now. I don't know if any of you did download the slides and get to this part before me, but if you hadn't, then opportunity again to get through there. But we've also got a bit of time at the end to go through any questions, if there are any. But also as a bit of a summary of what we've covered. So we've gone through the full data journey from collecting the data, building out your dashboard, and then how we streamline that process. So I could imagine this is where a lot of the questions will be coming from is, I don't know, anything to do with different channels, any data, what processes can actually be turned from manual into automated. And then data warehousing, I know I've covered that quite recently, but I'm sure that's driven up any sort of ideas, any questions?
Great. Well, thank you for everyone for joining today's session. Hope you've got quite a lot out of it. As Ryan mentioned, please scan that QR code there to get a copy of your slides. It will take you to a bit of a survey first, but yeah, once you complete that, you will receive the slides. And any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to both the Digital Ninjas and Supermetrics team. But thank you for your time.